Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the second day of our launch. We are pleased to be in conversation with Peter Achayo, and I'll offer a bit of an introduction. There's many things you can say about Peter Achayo, but we cannot exhaust it, so I will offer this very short introduction. Achayo is an independent art researcher who has built a very influential practice in writing and blogging about African arts. And we can view more of what he's doing and the great work he's publishing on African Art Matters on Instagram and catch up with other projects. So welcome, Peter. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jess, and congratulations on the launch of this very important and timely platform and initiative. Can't wait to see what this new vehicle you have. I can't wait to see where it's going to take us.
Thank you. Asante sana.
Yeah.
You know, I've never told anyone this, but the first time I saw you, I was seeing photos of you on Instagram in major exhibitions, biennials, and I was wondering who is this guy. And I remember I messaged you and I said, "Hey, you're doing an amazing job, and thank you for doing highlights." And I didn't know who you were. So that was the first time I saw you. And the second time I saw you with a picture at in Germany. It was a documenter with Sheila.
Documenter, yes.
And then I wrote to Sheila and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And that's how I got to know you and your work.
Yes.
But I'm really I think your perspective really is really important and interesting because you have been following African art on the global stage. You've seen African art moving through these spaces, and I would like to really focus our presentation on that today. But to track back, maybe you can offer also a bit of a backstory on how you found yourself in this position.
Okay, it's a question I'm asked pretty often. So first, let me say, COVID. You hear it again. So, first I've followed contemporary art for many, many years. I mean, I've loved this from when I was in my teens. Growing up and living in Kisumu, there was no gallery, there was no art education, but there were frequent stories that you would see, whether looking at local art or international art in the local newspapers. And sometimes my dad would occasionally buy some international magazines like Time and Newsweek. So I remember from those many years ago, I mean, I was always very fascinated with art and with architecture as well. And so I do remember when I was in my final month, perhaps in high school, when friends were talking with friends and telling each other what we're going to do after high school. Of course, everyone wanted to go to uni. And then after uni, what do you do? And I said to my friends, I wanted to study banking and finance, then go and work in banking and finance. But I said, when I get 50, I want to retire early. And then I want to go back to school in the UK. That's really what I mentioned. I don't know why at that time. I said I wanted to go and study art history. And so they asked, and why would you do anything like that? And why art history? So I said, because I'm very interested in the arts and I'm very interested in becoming an art curator. So I said, then let me study. I shall have made enough money. So I didn't think that even working as a curator would earn me any money. So that's why I said I need to work, hit 50 in retirement, then I'm not really looking for money from anybody. So I'll go and do this thing as a passion project, And then, so fast track that. Then I moved to Nairobi, and then I found there were a number of galleries. So I've visited from Gallery Watatu when it was in downtown Nairobi to African Heritage House and all those galleries. I've followed the industry on and off for close to 30 years. But really, it was more just appearing at exhibitions to see what's going on. And there are also seasons when I completely disappeared from the scene, like for real long chunks of time, 2-3 years without stepping into a gallery. But every time I needed inspiration, I actually went to the Go Down, especially when the Go Down moved to Dunga Road. I would go to the Go Down and just hang around artists and studios. They didn't know me, and I was happy that they don't know me. So nobody would ask me difficult questions, and I would just linger around. I remember going to Elungat's studio, Panye, Jimmy Ogonga. Now, it actually was very interesting. So last year, somebody introduces me to Jimmy, and I'm like, wow, I'm happy to meet the curator of the Kenyan Pavilion at the Biennale in Venice. And then Jimmy says, Achayo, this is not the first time we're meeting. I remember you from when you would come to the Go Down 15, 20 years ago. And I'm like, my goodness, I thought I was always visiting people in incognito. So others have memories, that are very different. But anyway, so 5 years ago, I was working as a consultant, and I had a friend who wanted to set up some business in the cultural space. And so they came to me to help them with some advisory work. And so, well, we started the work. And then the process led me back into the Nairobi contemporary art space in a different way, not as one who is going in there as a hobbyist, but now beginning to look at it as a potential business prospect for a client of mine. And then out of that process, we actually even organized one exhibition away from the traditional gallery spaces. And that really opened my eyes. I was like, my goodness, you mean this thing that I always just treat as a hobby, is this interesting? Now, then my friend, sorry?
What was that exhibition?
The exhibition was called the BAWM art exhibition. B for books, A for art, W for wine, M for music, the BAWM Art Lover exhibition. Because I said, if we're going to do this thing, let's bring in a different sort of like immersive experience, different from the static shows that you see at the exhibitions, And for us also, then we moved it away from the typical spaces. So we hosted this at a restaurant along Raptor Road at the pantry. And it ran for, was it about 10 days, I think. And each day, weekend days, we had some very different experiences of book reading in partnership with Kwani. We had a day full of music. We had wine tasting, cheese, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so it really was like a mini festival done on a shoestring budget, but very, very exciting. So it really then brought back memories of things that I'd really desired, and I think I wasn't seeing anybody doing them. But then, so fast track that to then the business ran for a few months with a lot of energy, but then somewhere along the way, they thought, we can't do it the way I'd proposed. Then it made me feel disappointed to an extent, but made me want to find out more really on what could be done. And then this is 2018, 2019. So I actually got myself into a deep dive of doing research and what really is what's the state of African art? That's really what I was investigating, and within the global context. So I spent inordinate amounts of time, looking at this. And the more I delved into it, the more I realized there's something I needed to do. And this is something I needed to really get into. And come COVID, I took a break and went to the village, and now during that time is when it became very clear to me that I was actually going to dedicate the rest of my life, to tell the story of contemporary African art. And then that's really how African Art Matters was born. So the name came about just about that I'm doing something. And I'd already made up my mind as well that I was going to start by telling the story and amplifying these stories that I was coming across on Instagram. And also I'd made up my mind as well that I wanted to, with my feet firmly rooted in Nairobi, I wanted to really look at the global context, from an African perspective. And so that's why it's African art. And for me, really, my message, its mission is to amplify the stories, the importance, the impact of contemporary African art to the African society within the continent. Yeah.
Awesome. And then this perspective is really interesting because you're coming from Kisumu, which is away from the epicenter of art really in Nairobi. As we say, there are no galleries, there's no strong infrastructure to support the arts. And so you move to Nairobi, and now from Nairobi, you go outside of the continent entirely to do this. And so then I'm wondering, what, in your opinion, or what have you seen has been the change from the time you started that first exhibition till now, that artists are doing all these awesome things around the continent, the global field? What have been one of the major differences or challenges that have come up through that time and now?
I think for me, first and foremost is I must give it up to Instagram. Instagram is it's a very good bridge for information and data and content, because there are things that have been happening, but before you would only rely, say, on Margarita Wagashero to write in The Nation for you to even know something is going on. But today, with Instagram and with everybody else being their own media, you are able to, just sitting on your phone for 1 or 2 minutes, you'll be able to have a grasp of a whole universe of what's taking place, not only in Nairobi, indeed, but across the world. That's one. Two is also a multiplicity of new venues and players in the market. I think like last year for me was really big, seeing the opening of the Nairobi Contemporary Art Institute. That was really special, I believe, in the Nairobi art ecosystem. And then secondly, also the participation of Kenya at the Venice Biennale, with all the challenges as well that they did face. I think it's a big story that helped to elevate the Nairobi contemporary scene. Then, of course, you look at galleries like Circle Art that are constantly traveling and participating in international art fairs. That's quite a big thing. But locally also, you're seeing now even just typical shopping malls, Sarit and Village Market, having their own kind of programming, with having platforms for emerging artists. The Ugandans, for instance, the Ugandan artists, if you shut down the Village Market, I think you easily wipe out 50%, perhaps, of the income that goes to Ugandan artists. There's almost every month you'll find Ugandan artists renting the exhibition space at the Village Market. So you find that the Village Market, Sarit Center, are players who never imagined that. I don't think that anybody would have thought that they would become very, very important platforms that offer space for artists that are not able to find representation with Circle or one-off, because Nairobi is a small gallery market, just with 2 very strong commercial galleries. So then, of course, you've got all these small but very important galleries as well. And then, importantly, again, look at Instagram as well. It's a very useful platform for artists. I know artists who have never had an exhibition, but they have thriving practices just because they're able to use Instagram to showcase their work and to find collectors or to find buyers. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a whole world out there on Instagram, on websites, and all these things. The connectivity has grown and become more tangible and easier. I mean, it's a global village. But still, there's I'm really thinking also about all the exhibitions that are happening, major exhibitions outside the continent.
Yes.
There's an article on our website, on the homepage, about 5 major exhibitions that shifted the conversation of African art globally. And some of the exhibitions have never been to the continent.
Yes.
By African artists. Well, probably made on the continent, probably not. But we have not gotten to see that work. It's traveled through other countries. Globally, there are exhibitions, and we never get to see it. And so when you're doing your travels and seeing all these things, what has been the reception of this work? And what is the feeling that you come to when you see this work that we also do not get to see? It's remediated through the screens for us. What has that been like for you?
That's it's a question that is very heavy in some regards, because we have artists here that are very important, that are very much sought after overseas, and we don't have spaces, perhaps, or institutions that can show their work for whatever reason. But when you travel out there, then you're able to see these works. And it's not easy to travel to see these works. I remember last year, I had to, I made a 5-hour trip, from Stuttgart to Basel, no, it was maybe about 4 hours to go and see a show, a solo by Michael Armitage. Because, he's a big Kenyan artist. He's never had an exhibition in Nairobi. And I was like, there's no way I can go back to Nairobi and Michael is showing just 4 hours away. So I made that sacrifice, and to go and see the works, and extraordinary, It was a solo at the Public Museum in Basel. Then that was in summer. Again, during that season, I traveled almost to about 6 German cities, just visiting their museums, art museums, to see the works of some great African artists. Of course, amongst works by artists from other places, Europe, North America, and so on and so forth. But I particularly was quite keen to see the works by some of the African masters and some of the notables, works that you will never get to see in Africa. And of course, to see these works, particularly in the museums, they don't show this work. It's no longer that season where they would show work just either as tokenism, or just sort of like almost denigratory in the sense that this is primitive work, and you then look at it vis-a-vis what to consider, to be the best works from Europe. I saw Julie Meretu's work in a museum. In fact, it's a museum that focuses on very some of the best works out of Western Europe in Dresden. So I saw Julie's and Kehinde Waile's, and the only 2 pieces by non-European artists amongst great European names of history, and even some contemporary like the Kandinskys and so on and so forth. And I was like, my goodness. In fact, when I saw Kehinde's and I saw, I'd never seen their works before. From afar, I was a friend of mine, some African-American lady that we're traveling there with, and I said, that must be Kehinde Waile's. But I still ask myself the question, how is it placed within this body of work that's showcasing the best of European work? And so what was Julie's, it sort of like were sticking out like a sore thumb, and they almost didn't seem like they fit in within the curatorial programming. But all the same, I was just really delighted to finally see a Kehinde, to see a Julie. But importantly then, is that they actually placed on the same pedestal as the works that this museum regards as worthy, of their space. So, but again, even at the Venice Biennale, I saw even within the main space curated by Cecilia Alemani, I saw works by some real great artists from across the globe. It was really special to see works by Africans as well, within that space. And then it shows you that the question about quality, about technical expertise, about aesthetics, even about value, where Africa and the rest of the world is concerned in art discourse, it's a question that doesn't, you cannot say that our work is inferior. Absolutely not. This work is as good, and as astute as any that you will find. The conversation that then we need to flip is, why does the world regard this work as important, yet in the continent, we actually haven't seen it that way? And that's the reason, perhaps, why we are not showing these works in the continent. If you're to bring even Wangeshimutu or Michael Armitage to Nairobi in an exhibition, where would you show their works? I don't think we have a space for it. I don't think we have an institution right now that can boast really that they have what it takes to show these some of these great names.
I don't know about that, but the continent also, like, when I look at all the biennials and fairs happening on the continent, and there have been also major exhibitions that have happened in different regions of Africa that have really tried to push the conversation, push the envelope. When you think of the Bamako's and the Dakar Biennial, Cape Town Art Fair, and there's all these other ArtX in Lagos, which is really growing. There's all these things that are still happening, and more people are coming back to really set up the infrastructure. Michael Armitage, who you just mentioned, and Kai, all these things that are happening, and it's an exciting time to work on the continent as well. But I'm curious to find out more why the opinion that we do not have the capacity to show some of these people. Is it because of the traditional white cube? Is it because we need bigger, more international institutions? Why can't we show with whatever we have now?
I think it's first, interesting framing that you give it. It's a mixture of things. A bit of it is on infrastructure, but I think majorly, really. So when we look at infrastructure, then in this case, I'm not trying to restrict my framing to a white cube, but art can be put on the streets if it's safe, if it's designed for the streets, and it doesn't matter, who's putting out that art. Banksy is huge. He works on the streets. It's the white cubes, and the closed spaces that are fighting then to come and lock his works, within the four walls. But he's happy, to be out there on the streets, for instance, and is nonetheless regarded as one of the most notable, renowned artists of our time. Basquiat, who started out on the streets, and then his work found other forms, and is, I think, by far of any artist of color, I don't think anybody has sold better than Basquiat has sold. But that said, I think it really is the place of institution building. Do we have institutions with great ambition, intent, leadership, and programming that can carry these things through? I'm glad you cite at Lagos, for instance. If you look at Zaid's Mocha in South Africa, in Cape Town, or even the Bamako Biennale. But look, what really, it's not that they're big, that they have great infrastructure. No, it's really more the intentionality, the vision, the leadership, and just that proactive nature that their leaders have not only espoused as a vision, but actually that they have activated and continually do so. So I think it really is that place where we need to get to, for instance, and even very specific to Nairobi. Because in Nairobi, outside the city of Nairobi Contemporary, who is working in a way that, they have completely stretched out their hands, to pull both the seams from both ends, of the ecosystem, to bring it together, to create a house, where, we can do very broad programming. I don't think that anybody right now is building an institution that is thinking that way. If they have, perhaps it's a vision that has not been publicly articulated. So I'm yet to see that. But the moment we see that, I think it will be quite obvious, and we know by the kind of programming and the activities that they're going to put in place. Perhaps, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe this is what Nairobi Print Project perhaps is desiring to do. And if that's you want to do, please, we are here. Call on us. We want to support you.
That is what we want to do. That is what we are doing. That is what you also are doing. Art is a social production. I once I read that book by Rebecca Wolf, Art and Social Production. The question of really what is the responsibility comes to my mind. What is the responsibility of the artist, of the writer?
Yes.
Because art, I love what I do. I enjoy what I do. But at the end of the day, I keep telling people that it is work.
Yes.
It's my body to make it. It takes a lot of mental effort. It takes other people also to support my practice.
Yes.
And so we cannot create in a vacuum. People cannot survive in a vacuum. As much as we are trying to plug into the infrastructure to encourage conversation and criticality, write about it, talk about it, there is a huge, huge lack of support. Even in the simplest things. Even in the, we do not have like that strong of an education system in the arts right now in Nairobi. There's no government support. There's all these larger problems up here. There's other little problems. Lack of support, lack of collaboration between the artists, lack of collaboration in the small collectives that we have, in the institutions that are in Nairobi. And so we are still, there's that. You have started African Art Matters, and you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
I really understand that, and I don't think there's a roadmap to really approach these challenges, or at least for me, I'm finding out that motion is greater than emotion. It doesn't matter right now if people are not supporting a Nairobi Print Project in all these things, in money and in kind. But how do you move forward? How do you just do something? How do you grow within yourself without all these structures? How have you done that, Achayo, in your practice?
My goodness. I mean, Nairobi can be a very difficult market. It doesn't matter, not even in the arts, in anything. I mean, I've been a serial entrepreneur, and I've also been involved in a number of social projects, for close to 30 years. And I've got my personal experience. I also have stories from other people that we've worked with and collaborated with. Nairobians can give you, it's called what? They support you with their lips, with their mouths, by saying, but often you better know that it is you to wake up the next day and go and do what you guys talked about last night, Yes, because when you wake up in the morning, then everybody suddenly, some are not picking their calls, some have found new other things to do, So I think it's really what for me, I decided is I've got my great ambition. I have gone out and I constantly do seek out support and partnerships. But I've been disappointed many times, even very specific to the journey with the African Art Matters. But what I told myself when I was starting this project is I was going to look for everybody who could support me, but I was going to work alone, even if they don't come, And I tell you, the people who initially told me and encouraged me to do this thing, I never saw them when I started. And it was, as we say in Nairobi, they gave me what we call character development. And I woke up, showered, dusted myself off, and said, I'm gonna figure out how to journey, towards where I want to go. And Nairobians then wait to see how resilient you are. Perhaps, I don't know, how serious or committed you are towards your goals, Then the same people who ran away from you, you start seeing them coming. Sometimes they're coming because others have already come and endorsed you or validated you or partnered with you, I don't know, but they come all the same. But I don't work for these people. For me, what I said is, for me, what I was really interested in is that I was going to use my voice. I was going to use my time to tell the story of something that for me I found to be too wonderful to remain to remain hidden. There's so many artists from Nairobi that are doing such amazing work, and I actually get pissed off every single day, when I'm meeting people who I'm thinking should know about what these artists are doing and they do not know. But I've said to myself, you know what? I'm not going to tire. I'm not going to lose my voice. I will continue speaking, whether I go hoarse. In fact, I usually say my platform is for making noise. I will make noise, and I continue to make noise, whether here, whether overseas, whenever I travel. That's the only way that this story will be told. I mean, the markets that we look at and we admire, be it in Europe, be it in North America, what we don't appreciate is what it took to develop those ecosystems to what they are today. And it's a question that I'm constantly asking myself, how did these guys get to develop these markets? If you ask any major gallerist, or cultural worker or curator in Europe, I'm sure 99% of them perhaps would not know or even appreciate the history of those who built those ecosystems that they today enjoy, even as they sit at the helm, of the global art value chains, Yeah, I don't think many of them appreciate. And so from where we sit today, we really are pulling ourselves off, from deep in the basement. We're not even reached surface level yet. So we have to just keep finding soil, to fill up the hole. So as we fill up the hole, then our levels keep rising, Yes, and I will do it. I will never finish this job. Someday we all die and we move on. But I will make sure that I've done my bit. So somebody else can then now come, stand upon my shoulders, and so on and so forth. I think that's really what how I see it. And so I know it really is a blood, sweat, and tears kind of endeavor. Yeah. I don't know if I responded to you, but
very well, really. I think it just takes that personal journey to find out how the sausage is made. And I was just back at Kwana and I was sitting there and I was wondering, what does it take to be Wangeshimutu? What does it take to be these African giants that we see and hear but really never meet? There's some opacity there that you never really understand until you start that journey yourself. And it becomes clearer and clearer as we go. And more questions start coming up, really. But you said something interesting about it has taken years to build that infrastructure, even for these markets in the West. Years of writing, years of scholarship, criticism, artists making stuff, being experimental. And maybe this is a good segue also to really specifically talk about African Art Matters and the specific work that you're doing. Because you are writing about African art. There's not so many people right now in Nairobi specifically writing about African art and writing in a way that is not offering a report, writing that is offering criticism, a different perspective, the perspective that you're coming into the global market. And so talk to us about African Art Matters. What are you doing right now? What is in the future?
Okay. So first of all, we try to write as African Art Matters, but I think I've shied off from doing criticism right now. I'm more just trying to collect data about the practice across Nairobi, particularly looking at the volume and the velocity of events, whether through exhibitions or other kinds of programmings. Could be talks like the one we are holding here, could be trips and exhibitions that local artists are are engaging in other countries, in other markets, etc., etc. Because my approach is really to look at it from the market side and very specific, but also broadly just casting a light on the ecosystem. How is the ecosystem? What are the tiers within the ecosystem? What's the diversity? What's the extent? Who are the players within this ecosystem? At various levels that are very, very important. For instance, in our ecosystem, I can say we yet to have or to develop our own local art museum, which is a huge miss for us. Two, you reference writing and criticism and just really good scholarly writing. We don't have any journal or publication that's dedicated to the Nairobi practice or broadly looking at Kenya. And again, that's another huge miss from academia, the institutions teaching art. They are very weak. They are not getting the ecosystem. I've said this over and over again. You don't see any research or scholarly writing by the scholars, by the researchers, whether at technical university that have a dedicated creative arts department or Kenyatta University. The universities don't have any gallery, have never shown any work anywhere, don't collect work. So then, and of course, they're also not engaged, even with their students, in a very robust and dynamic way, engaging with the ecosystem, with the industry. You don't see it. So then you see clearly very, very weak linkages, and almost a very casual relationship that academia and researchers have with the local practice. And I think those are areas that need serious action and engagement. And I hope people can rise up to fill up those spaces very, very fast, comparatively, without even looking at the West, in Makerere, you see a lot of activity, even with the academic staff participating as themselves, in exhibitions, whether it's in Uganda or elsewhere, you see a lot of writing. You see exhibitions by Makerere, by Margaret Trowell School. And I think those things really bring in quite some strong element of dynamism, yes, and energy into the ecosystem. So for us, therefore, then who then is writing, who is documenting, who is actually even doing doing sort of even peer reviews, of what people are doing in this market. If there are, then it's people from the West or from other domains, and then even the work then is resident, in places where they come from, and we don't have access to it. We don't have visibility of that work. Yeah, and so I think those areas are areas that we must really advocate for change and for activity. And I think especially technical and Kenyatta University being public institutions, I can say without fear of contradiction that they need to rise up, because we fund those institutions. And really, it's through those kind of works and activities. Yeah, but again, even with the commercial galleries, I think they can also do more in terms of just more outreach, more public engagement to win new audiences, to do outreaches, to connect better with collectors. But in terms of who is buying, right now, we know it's not a hidden fact that 99% of local arts end up in the West, because those who are buying are white people who are based here, either expatriates or as visitors. But what I do know from my research as well, the international art ecosystems that are strong have been built from patronage. Number one, by governments. Governments are the biggest art collectors. Let's take the case, say, like in the UK, where the royal family, over 400 years, they own over 1 million. The collection is 1 million pieces of what they call letters, artifacts, jewelry, objects, and fine art. And that collection is worth $10 billion today. Take the case, say, for the White House. The White House has had an in-house curator since 1964 or 1965. They have a massive collection of their own. I like citing this the hour after the US president is sworn in, the first activity the US president does when they get into the Oval Office is actually to change what's behind his desk. It's the bust and it's the piece of art at the back. He picks the one that represents him, and all that is not from his own personal collection. He actually borrows it from the White House collection. State Department have this program they call Art in Embassies. It's a huge project, where they have art that every ambassador and senior diplomat can actually borrow from for their own, in whichever place they go to represent the country, they actually borrow that art, to have it in their office or in their house. And if you look at those cases, then we have quite a case to say to the Kenyan government. Kenya has about 60 missions. If we decided that they wanted to spend, say, $10,000 to buy one piece of art, to sit in the ambassador's office, you can imagine what that would mean to their local art ecosystem. But are the commercial galleries ready for this kind of engagement? Are they really? Yes. If you take the case, say, look at Java. I like the case for Nairobi Java House, that with their 67 plus outlets, they have been very mission driven from the first day they set up 24, 5 years ago, that they're going to actually buy art for each of their branches, What if Equity Bank, with their 260 plus outlets, branch network, decided to also go into art buying for their branches? What if Safaricom did the same, Yeah, so the big corporates, but corporates also for government. Sometimes what government does, the corporates decide that we actually also want to look the part. Yeah, so before we engage governments and corporates, I think we need to put our house in order. And this work is really looked at from two different areas within the ecosystem. There's demand side, there's supply side. The supply side of the artists. The artists also do have a serious role to play. Have they actually even seen their role? Do they understand it? Yes. Are they taking responsibility about what themselves they need to do, just besides being in your studio and producing art? There are things definitely that artists must do. You're an artist yourself. Look at how you've extended yourself, Yes, and this really is part of the efforts that artists need to also see and take as their responsibility, because nobody's going to do this for them. You want a market that works for you? Please, you have to invest in it. You have to do something else beyond just producing work. So on supply side, their work is cut out for them. On demand side, we don't have a choice. We must figure out how we can collaborate and support each other to grow the pie. If we are all focusing on this little queen cake, this little cake that we have on my plate, then it won't be enough for all of us. But if we decide that we actually want to bake a huge, big cake, then we will have more than enough to eat and to share out there. Yeah.
Really, truly, the work is immense and expansive. And that said, we each have a responsibility to do that. And probably one day in history, the history of African art, Kenyan art history, they will mention Peter Achayo with African Art Matters and just Atieno with Nairobi Print Project as people who made significant contributions in the art scene.
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot we can say about all the infrastructure needed to support this, but our time has run out, sadly. The conversation can continue on our podcast, in our writing. Please look out for these as we launch them in the next coming months.